Over to
That's
you.
okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar for Dyslexia Sparks on managing school and exam anxiety in children. My name is Sam Garner, and I'm coming to you from Paignton in Devon, where I have the fortune of living most of the time. I think it's a long, long way from where many of you are. My approach, I'm an ex-Senko and also a qualified mental health practitioner, and I've worked with schools for a long time helping support the mental health of students and also making the crossover to supporting SEN students' mental health as well. Now, I'm not somebody who tells you what to do and how it is. I'm somebody who gives information, who educates metacognition and makes suggestions of things to try. And the key is with mental health is it's different for everybody, and you have to find out what works for you, and children have to sort of find out what works for them as well. I must also warn you that I am menopausal, which means frequently I can absolutely forget what I'm doing, where I am, and the word that's happening. See, I can't even think of the word that comes to my mind. So I saw a TV program the other day, and somebody couldn't think of the word finger, and they said hand toe, which I thought was a really great name. I'm trying to think about it. Anyway, so that's who I am, and that's what I'm doing. I will have time for questions at the end, so please feel free to pop them in the chat, and I'll try and find where that is, or you can ask questions at the end. So let's look at statistics with regard to mental health and children. It is difficult to know accurately, but it's estimated that 1 in 6 children have a mental health problem, and half, and I would honestly say a little bit more, of mental health problems start by the age of 14. Now, we also know that children and adults with special educational needs are statistically more likely to suffer from a mental health issue. Now, this doesn't mean that they're definitely going to, and it's not because of the SEN. It's not as a direct causation, but the correlation because of the way they're treated and the way the world treats them and the difficulties they have, which may become clearer. 80% of children and adults with autism spectrum condition are estimated to have an anxiety disorder. So yeah, SEN doesn't cause the mental health illness, but the consequences of having a mental health of SEN can often cause a mental health issue. They're called secondary mental health issues. So let's talk about anxiety and what is it and why is it so hugely prevalent at the moment in adults and children. Well, we have anxiety. It is a fear response. We have anxiety similar to stress when we have something that has happened that we don't know what the outcome is going to be, and we have limited control over what is going to happen as well. Now, the key to remember with anxiety is we need it. It's important. Some anxiety is perfectly normal, and I had anxiety before starting this webinar. That's great, because you'll see what it does is hopefully gives me a bit more vavavoon, and I'll explain why in a minute. It has a purpose, and it's been designed over millions of years as we've evolved to keep us safe. So I will go into that. So first of all, we have to change the language that you're never going to get rid of anxiety. What you do is you manage anxiety so it doesn't have a negative impact on your life. So anxiety is a problem when it is constant, when it impairs your executive function, which means you go into such a sort of fight, flight, freeze mode, you can't think logically, and it negatively affects your day-to-day life. It stops you doing things, and it affects your physical health. Now, with regard to the negative impact on day-to-day life, you know, it's got to impact your life, just not stop you doing something. So for example, I have anxiety at the thought of jumping out of a plane with a parachute. Okay, now I'm not going to do it, so anxiety is stopping me doing that. But to be honest, that's not going to have a massively drastic impact on my life. I'm not going to die going, I wish I jumped out of a plane with a parachute on my back. It's if anxiety is really seriously impacting your day-to-day life negatively, that means that it's not being managed correctly, and sort of take action to do that. What are the causes of anxiety? As with many mental health issues, there isn't one specific cause. There's correlation and causation. We know that having low self-esteem is a a risk factor. And as all, we know that vulnerable people, those with most adversity that they face in their life, are least equipped to deal with it. That's part of the reason why the statistical risk is there, because having an SEN or a disability means that you are going to face more adversity in life, and that is one of the reasons that it puts you at a higher risk. Now, I've said that low self-esteem is a big risk factor, and there are 3 common factors underpinning many mental health issues. Low self-esteem, which I'm going to elaborate on in a minute. The second one is catastrophizing. If you are always thinking doom and gloom, and you are always thinking worst case scenario, that is going to increase your risk of having a mental health issue. It's going to mean that your anxiety is going to be increased, because you're always thinking, oh, the worst thing could happen. Oh no, this could happen. And you're always thinking the worst case. And also social isolation is a common factor. And think about it with regard to the COVID lockdown that we've had. This is part of the reason why anxiety levels have increased so much post-COVID. We had social isolation. We know that it has a long-term impact. We know that it's not good for people. And so COVID gave us social isolation. Catastrophizing. All of the news all of the time was how bad it could be, and warning you not to go out or not to break the rules for fear of basically death in some situations, the ultimate catastrophization. And also we had limited control over it. So we've come out of COVID having forgotten our coping techniques, forgotten what it's like, how we managed our anxiety before COVID, and we had 5 years of bad news spent, being thrown at us. And it can feel a little bit like that in the news at the moment. Now, the key with low self-esteem and why it is really important is because you may hear a lot of people talking about belonging. And it is a desire of all of us, once we are safe, physically safe, that we want to belong. We want to belong to a group. And what happens is, from a very young age, we develop an idea of how we need to be in order to belong and to be loved. So we develop a perspective of what we have to be like in order to be successful and in order to be loved, because we believe we have to be worthy of love. We believe we have to be successful of love, and it's all our main desire. And many of our anxieties relate to not being good enough, and not belonging and being different and being shown up in some way. So this is just a list of, for example, many things that people convince themselves that they have to be in order to be successful and in order to be worthy and loved. And, when you have a special educational need that affects you academically and affects that you can't do things that other people could do, other people seem to be able to do in your classes easily, that is going to affect your self-esteem. I think also we have an academic system whereby quite often it's set up that children's value is based on their academic levels, primarily, and that's why we have an increase of exam anxiety, because their whole perception of what their value is and what their lovability is based on their academic results. As parents, it can be very, very difficult as well to be a parent of an SEN child, because somehow you can feel that your parenting skills are less than if your child isn't doing academically well, or your child isn't thriving in school. And that pressure can be upon you as well, which can increase parental anxiety. So one of the aims to do is of therapy and of daily life, and the things I try to do, is to get children and adults to understand that this is all a pile of pants. It is an utter pile of pants, and we've got to value our own worth and believe that we are worthy of love, regardless of what we may perceive as our flaws and our mistakes. And, that we are lovable. We are incredibly lovable exactly for who we are now. And if other people can't show that, That's their issue, not yours. And so what we're very good, and particularly SEN children, are very good at saying, well, it's my fault, it's because I'm stupid, it's because I can't do this, rather than looking at, actually, I am worthy of love and the issue is elsewhere and I've got to believe in myself. So anxiety, as I've already said, is related to the unknown and events we cannot control. We have fear of being unlovable, being laughed at, and we develop maladaptive ways of managing our anxiety. For example, safety behaviours, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And as I've already said, catastrophizing increases your anxiety. If you are constantly thinking worst case scenario, then you're going to have high levels of anxiety. So at the very beginning of this, I said some anxiety is healthy. How is that, Sam? How does that work? Because it doesn't feel healthy. Well, there are many types of sort of anxiety and stress that we can have. And a little bit of anxiety is good, because what it does, anxiety and stress and fear have a purpose, and that is that it's developed over millions of years as we've evolved to keep us safe, to enhance our chances of survival when we meet threatening situations, and it empowers us mentally and physically in order to meet the threat. And you've got to remember that historically the threats were all physical, from a saber-toothed tiger, from the caveman next door, something like that. So all of our threats were physical, so we had to develop a system to make us somehow more physically able to meet the demand that is placed upon us. And that is all linked to something called our autonomic nervous system, which is a control system that regulates our bodily functions. Now, this has, I'm not going to get into massive technical biological knowledge, because I don't know it and understand it, but I know enough to be able to apply it to daily life. And we have two responses linked to the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic response, which prepares us for something stressful happening, and the parasympathetic response, which says, it's okay now, you can heal, you can rest. It's called the rest and digest function. So let's initially look at the sympathetic response. And when I explain this to people, they go, so that's why that happens. That's why I feel that way. And it is really important to understand this, because the sympathetic response, as I said, is designed to make us physically stronger and more mentally alert, but it comes with other physical side effects, which when you're feeling anxious can really compound how you're feeling. So how does it make us meet the threat? It produces cortisol, and if the threat feels really severe, it can produce adrenaline. And these are stress hormones and chemicals, and they are, as I say, designed to trigger our fight, flight, freeze response to keep us safe. It's designed to regulate our blood pressure, increase our blood sugar, send it to the brain, which makes us more awake and cognitively alert. It dilates our blood passages and vessels to send more oxygen to our muscles, so we are physically stronger. So if you think about, I don't know if you, I love watching police programs, and if you have a really drunk, angry man, it can take like 5 or 6 policemen to pin him down, and that's because he is physically stronger because of the fight mode and the physical strength that is going to the muscles instead. Now, short term, this is great. So I've got a bit of adrenaline, not adrenaline because it's not that anxiety, but I've got a bit of cortisol, which means I'm more cognitively alert, and my brain is functioning as best it can, bearing in mind my womb situation. But long term in production has a real negative impact on our mental health. It's not good for us. And why is that? Well, because the key is that the cortisol and the adrenaline don't magic this extra energy for our survival out of nowhere. Excuse me, I'm going to cough again. I do apologize. It doesn't magic this extra energy out of nowhere. it diverts energy from other bodily functions. Okay, so this means one of the things it does is it shuts down your digestive system. So that's why we have a dry mouth, because you stop producing saliva, hence I needed a drink. You have higher glucose levels. There's lots of links to diabetes being stress related. It can increase your hunger because you've got a sugar rush. So after a stressful situation or a stressful day, if you have a hankering for chocolate or particular food, that's why it is. It also stops your stomach producing and processing food, and your bowel processing food, which is why we have irritable bowel, why we have diarrhea, why we have nausea, why we can have constipation, why we can feel sick as well. And it also diverts energy away from your immune system. So after a long period of stress, you know, for the adults in here, your first day of your holidays, many are ill because your immune system has been weakened by the stress of your job. And then when you relax, it's like, oh, well, I can't fight off any more stuff now. That's it, you know. So that's why you're likely to be ill. But this is why we have physical symptoms. And this is what children experience, which can then prove confusing for them. So this is, you know, common side effects of stress, anxiety. This is what panic attacks are. Lightheaded, dry mouth, fatigue, because it's very tiring, nausea, sweaty palms, cramps, that feeling of ice going through your veins, muscle pain. We know that for some people, fibromyalgia is as a physical manifestation of an unresolved trauma. And it's not that somebody's making it up in their head. It is the stress chemicals having that impact on your body. If you've ever done anything about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, which says that the more adversity a child has had in life, the poorer their long-term outcomes are. This is why, because it damages their immune system. So we've got to make children aware of this, that look, yes, you have. One of the things I'm going to talk about is distress tolerance, being able to cope with feeling uncomfortable and manage those emotions. So you've got to say, this is a normal physical reaction. It's not just you. Everybody gets this. Now, just as an aside, adrenaline can last up to an hour in your body. So if you're working with somebody who's gone in extreme emotional overwhelm and overload, give them an hour to calm down, because with the adrenaline in their body, they could quickly go back into fight-flight mode. Cortisol can last up to 8 hours in your body, which is why after a very stressful day or a stressful event, people find it difficult to switch off and to sleep. But I am going to give some ways you can do that. Now, what happens is, I've talked about the fight, flight, freeze response, but there are other reflex actions that we have that are very often misunderstood, and that is flop, friend, and fawn. And I'm also going to explain what they are, but the flop one I'm just going to explain briefly now, because you're not going to encounter it day to day. But the flop one is where the physical or the emotional pain is so great, your body just shuts down. Your brain just shuts down as a self-defense protection measure. So, for example, I fell off a horse years ago. I can remember coming off the horse. I can remember being at the bottom of the hill. I can't remember landing and rolling when I broke lots of bones, because the physical trauma was so great, I went into flop mode. All right. Now, what do the other behaviors look like? Your fight response isn't just about being aggressive and fighting. Competitive people, controlling people, this is a fight response as well, in that I've got to control the environment, I've got to control somebody, or I've got to be better than them, I've got to compete with them. The flight response is running away or avoidance. You know, some children who find school too much, it's an avoidance technique. I'm not going to do that thing that makes me feel anxious. Selective mutism, perfectionism. This can also have a crossover into the freeze response. For example, ignoring it, pretending it hasn't happened, sticking your head in the sand, self-medicating. Another freeze response is not making decisions, and this is similar to the fawn response. But if you, I don't know if you ever watch Hoarders, but I love watching program on hoarders because it makes my house feel really tidy. But what happens is somebody will have had a trauma, and they go into the freeze response, which means they can't throw anything away. They are so paralyzed by fear and anxiety that literally, I think people who haven't suffered with extreme anxiety or depression don't understand how your brain can make you believe the most irrational pants stuff going, and you're like, why do you believe that? I don't know, but I've suffered with depression. My brain will convince me of the most irrational stuff because it isn't working properly. So, I can't make a decision. I don't know what to do. I'm not going to make a decision. I'm not going to do it, And then you have the friend response, which is the most misunderstood for me. And that is whereby when somebody is feeling anxious or stressed or a fear response, they laugh or they smile. And we are so misunderstanding this in children when they're being reprimanded and they laugh or they smile, and we take it as a sign of disrespect. And it's really, really, really not. Think of, I know adults, and I've done, where I've had the giggles at the most serious times that are inappropriate, like funerals or something, and you have an attack of the giggles. It's a defense mechanism because you cannot cope with the intensity of the emotions. And then you have the fawn response, which is people pleasing. Is this all right, miss? Am I doing the right thing, miss? Do you like me, miss? Is this okay, miss? What do you think I should do? Can I go with you, miss? Is this all right? Now, linked to the reflex behaviors are also actions we take called safety behaviors. And these are considered maladaptive ways of coping and managing your anxiety, because we think, right, if I do this, then I'm not going to feel as anxious. But very often they're only a temporary relief, and they don't get to the root of the anxiety. Okay, and so the safety behavior can then become more complicated as you add other safety behaviors. Excuse me. So what sort of safety behaviors are we looking for? We have preventative safety behaviors, avoiding situations. If I don't go, I'm not going to feel that anxiety. If I don't do it, then I'm not going to have the anxiety, am I? Or if you rely on other people, will you go with me? Please go with me. And you'll see these are similar to reflex actions. Avoidance behaviors. Why did you misbehave in the classroom? Because I didn't want to do the work. So we threw you out the class, and then we therefore rewarded your behavior. It was an avoidance behavior. Or a compulsive behavior. And this is where people develop inflexible thinking or routines. It has to be this. This has to happen. I have to do this routine every day. Otherwise, my anxiety is going to be overwhelming. But the thing is these compulsive behaviors don't manage the anxiety. So you've got the original anxiety, then you have anxiety because you can't complete your compulsive behavior. So then people start adding on more sort of complex routines in order to try and manage the anxiety. This is sort of leads to obsessive compulsion disorder as well. And then we have restorative behaviors, which are very similar to reflex actions, is what we do when we are feeling it. I'm going to run away. I'm going to go into a routine. I'm going to seek reassurance. I'm going to look for a distraction, or I'm going to suppress my emotions and they come out later. And this is sort of linked to masking, because what we've got to recognize is unmanageable anxiety is exhausting. Now, there are lots of analogies to try to explain how tiring a mental health issue and an SEN is. But the best one I like, and I know it's well used, but the best one I like is the spoons analogy. And you need to think of a spoon's analogy. A spoon is a unit of energy. And what happens is, so you're neurotypical, you're absolutely fine. You don't have a mental health issue. You wake up with 20 spoons. And the effort of getting into school or work uses 3 spoons. The effort of being in school all day uses 12 spoons. So at the end of the day, you've got 5 spoons left to do what you want. If you have a special educational need, and that may come with or without anxiety or a mental health issue, everything uses more spoons. You may wake up with fewer spoons, but let's say you still wake up with 20 spoons. The effort of being in school, going to school, can use 6 spoons. The effort of being in school, the effort of masking, the extra effort of concentrating in a system that isn't necessarily set up to help you can use all of your spoons, the rest of your spoons. Or you can run out of spoons by the end of the day, before the end of the day. And you need spoons to regulate and manage your emotions. So that's why in a lot of cases, people see worsened behavior at the end of the day. Or if parents say, when they get home, they are depleted, they can't do anything else, they're so utterly exhausted. And then I've heard schools say, well, they're fine in school, so it's not a problem for us. It is. You must ensure that your setting as a school doesn't use all their spoons so they've got none left at the end of the day, because that's discriminatory. Okay. So background, hopefully that's all given you some background and some understanding as to behaviors and feelings and emotions. Sam, this is great. What can I do about it? We need to change the language that we're using. Anxiety is an important part of life. Miss, I've got an anxiety. That is great. That means you are a normal, functioning human being. Okay. You will never get rid of anxiety. And this is a conversation I have with parents. Your child will not wake up one day with no anxiety. That's not how it works. We need to learn to manage our anxiety, and we need to model and give techniques to our children to manage their anxiety. Now, as part of this, we will make mistakes. We will make mistakes. But in the world of sort of therapy, and particularly cognitive behavioral therapy, which I'm a big fan of, there is no failure, there's only feedback. And good enough is good enough. You know, I'm a mental health expert. I'm an ex-Senko. You think I'd be the perfect parent, right? I wasn't. But it was good enough. It was good enough parenting. And we've also got to remember that as parents, for those parents watching this, your parenting skills are not reflected by academic achievement of your child. We've got to be very careful that we don't go along with this belief that, you know, if your child doesn't go to university, that somehow you have failed as a parent. You know, I've worked with the most academically gifted and qualified people that were crippled by anxiety and desperately unhappy. Okay, so we've got to look at what we value as a measure with our parenting. You've also got to remember that you may not see the logic in your child's thinking. They may say something and you'll be like, what planet are you on? Because that just, I don't understand. You know, sometimes my daughter will say things to me and I go, was I there? Was I your mum in that situation? Because I can't remember that. Or maybe I have a different perspective. But that's okay. And that's perfectly normal. So we have to look at the fact we cannot protect our children from anxiety. It is an important part of life. And we cannot protect our children from all harm in life, from all difficulty in life, and all challenges in life. That is not our role. Our role is to teach our children to manage difficult situations and be supported in difficult situations, not to avoid them. Okay, so I know that I did a bit of overprotective parenting, and then when they went to university, they were ringing me up all the time for the smallest thing, and I'm like, I messed up here. I didn't, you know, let them be and learn things. You know, my overprotectiveness did harm, and so that's what we've got to recognize. If we try to protect our children, we may be making the situation work. We are making worse. We are making their comfort zone smaller. We need to empower our children to increase their ability to tolerate feeling uncomfortable, but not letting it stop them. Okay. Now, I'm not saying let your child do anything. Be clear. I'm not saying, you know, let your child use a chainsaw and learn the lessons. You know, these are some great pictures. I think I saw a TikTok of a man whose wife says, oh, you're looking after the kids. Can you send me pictures? And he makes up all these pictures of the kids, like using a chainsaw to send to his wife, or, you know, doing some satanic ritual there as well. So I'm not saying you still got to protect them from serious harm, but just think about, is my protection helping them in the short term or the long term? Okay, what am I doing? How am I empowering them to grow and become independent adults? Because also they'll get on your pip when they leave home and you think, oh, great, this is my life back. And they're ringing you all the time. You're like, oh, this is annoying the pants off me now. So what we also have to do, and we're not very good at, is acknowledge how they feel, acknowledge how our children feel. Saying don't worry about it has never, ever helped anybody with their anxiety. We should always listen, validate, accept their perspective. We may not understand it, but we don't have to. That's okay. Accept their perspective, acknowledge how they're feeling, don't dismiss how they're feeling. And it can be really difficult because you're a little bit like, well, you think that's tough, wait till you've got a mortgage, and wait till you've got to put the bins out every Thursday, and think of what's for tea every day of the week for the next 20 years. That is stress. But it is stressful to them. Don't trivialize it. Don't cheer them up. I hear that you're feeling really sad. I feel you're feeling anxious. That must be really difficult for you. And then we've got to think as parents as well. How are you modeling? What are you modeling? What language are you modeling? Do you catastrophize? Sometimes I've worked with children with anxiety, unmanageable anxiety, and then we've spoken to the parents and I'm like, yeah, got it. Yeah, got it. Because, oh, I'm so sorry I'm late, and I thought the car was going to blow up, and then I don't know how we're going to do this. What is your catastrophization? Talk through your anxiety, okay? Talk through your anxiety, but don't catastrophize. I'm feeling really anxious. I'm acknowledging how I'm feeling, but what my plan is this, okay? So we will have anxiety all our lives. Make sure that that's clear and provide positive norms. Modeling and discussing and managing. Do you know I felt really anxious last night? Did you, Mum? Yeah, I did. And this is what I did. But it's perfectly normal to feel that. And problem solving skills. Don't go into fix it mode with your child. Oh, that sounds tricky. What could you do? What other things could you do instead? Now, also the language that we use is important. Positive motivation always has better outcomes. And this is one of the reasons why catastrophization isn't good. So let me give you an example here. Do not think of blue monkeys. Do not, under any circumstances, think of blue monkeys. Now, how many of you think of the blue monkeys? But if I hadn't have mentioned blue monkeys, you wouldn't have thought of blue monkeys. So when we use language like, I don't think they'll be able to do that. It's too much for them. I brought them in, but I don't think they're going to stay. They shouldn't have to do that. Then you are using negative language instead of give it a go. Give it a go. Whatever the outcome, you'll be okay. And then we've got to think about self-esteem boosts. I think sometimes in the education system, we aren't always good enough in supporting the self-esteem of our children. We are just measuring their value on their academic worth. But also think about how often you praise yourself. Do you accept a compliment, or are you self-critical as a parent or, as an adult role model? What are you doing? Because my children are like, but Mum, you always criticize yourself. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. And I hate the fact that you've pointed that out to me. Thank you very much. So now I'm like, oh, I'm fabulous. I'm fabulous. That's what we do. And compliment sandwiches don't work. They're known as a poo sandwich. But, people think, oh, well, for every negative, I'm going to give 2 positives. And I say, okay, let me give you an example. I see you in the street. I say, I love your shoes. Absolutely love your outfit, but your hair's a mess. Are you going to go away thinking, oh, she likes my shoes? No, you're going to go away not knowing the 2 compliments. You're going to go, my hair's a mess, because we have a negative cognitive bias. So that's the thing to remember. And we've got to also help prepare our children for adulthood. We've got to give them more independence as they grow. We've got to give them minimum support as possible as they grow up. We have to become facilitators rather than managers. Autonomy is a very, very important element to positive mental health. It's one of the reasons why I talk a lot about we've got to make our SEN children as independent as possible using technology and using better systems, because having to rely on other people is impactful to your mental health. So one of the best ways of supporting anxiety, and it doesn't work for everybody, but it works for most of the people most of the time, is using cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, which is a talking therapy. It's non-analytical. So, you know, you're not going to say, well, I saw the way you looked at that dog, and I think that that means that you were jealous of your father as a child. It's not Freudian in any way. It's very much about looking at changing perceptives and giving ideas. It's very much about looking at your initial thought being a negative thought and how that impacts your feelings and your behavior, and changing your initial thought and retraining your brain. And it's not quick because you have to rewire your brain, but the earlier intervention, the better, before that pathway becomes well entrenched. So, for example, some of you will have negative thoughts about yourself that you've been practicing a long time. And so that negative thought is well entrenched and well established in your mind. And therefore, it could take longer to sort of change that viewpoint and that perspective, because it's not fact and it's not true. So CBT, a lot of people think is about positive thinking and, you know, but this is toxic positivity. It's about thinking differently. And it's not, you know, I'm not going to have a bad day and nothing's going to hurt me ever. That's not going to happen. It's about thinking differently and that I'll be okay. I'll be okay. I am still worthy and I will be okay at the end of it. Now, what a lot of interventions and a lot of sort of things that we do with children miss out on is motivating children to want to change. Okay, we presume that they don't want, you know, that well, you should automatically want to be at school full time. You should automatically want to sit that exam. It's human nature. It's not human nature. So part of working therapeutically and changing behaviors is looking at motivating. What are you missing out on with your anxiety? What is it stopping you doing? Can you imagine what your life would be like if you were able to manage your anxiety? Can you imagine what were the things you would do if anxiety wasn't stopping you? And okay, let's focus on that. And let's also look at the fact that we can achieve that, but you're going to feel a bit uncomfortable. So people talk about side effects of therapy. One of the side effects of CBT is that you will feel uncomfortable, because when you make change, you feel uncomfortable, but you will get through that. So one of the things we need to do to support young people, and these are CBT activities from resources I write for schools, help your child expand their comfort zone. And you'll see that CBT is just guided conversations, and there are lots of resources and books out there to help with this. But it's saying, let's challenge yourself. You choose something little out of your comfort zone, and it might be going to take a letter around to the neighbour next door. It might be, I don't know, ringing a shop and ask if they've got a product in. Give them something out of their comfort zone, small steps to improve what is called their distress tolerance. You are going to feel uncomfortable. It's like having a vaccination injection. It's going to hurt. You're probably going to have a sore arm, but your long-term impact is going to be a lot better. And that's better than the long-term outcome. So challenge children, challenge your child to do something out of their comfort zone. Discuss it. Be prepared. Here, being prepared. What are you going to do? When will you do it? How do you think you will feel? Let's talk about what were you worried about happening? Because, you know, if the thing is with catastrophization is we go, oh no, what if this happens? And we don't think further than that. And it's okay to have a plan. So it's why comedians get good, public speakers get good, because we are experienced with most situations happening and we have a plan of what we'll do if that happens. And one of mine is just to laugh at myself, and I'm comfortable enough to do that. So pre-prepared with your child. Look at the language that they are using. Think of the Blue Monkeys situation. Say, no, don't tell yourself you can't do it. Say, I am feeling anxious, but I'm going to give it a go. Okay. I am worried about, you know, the outcomes, but it's going to be okay. And it's okay to be nervous. And if I say the thing, I'll just laugh and apologize. If I say the wrong thing, it's okay. You are still fantastic. You are still worthy of love. It doesn't matter. You are still amazing. Okay. And then one of the best activities for, this is great for exam anxiety, for any anxiety. This is something I use on a regular basis for myself, because I have down times. And remember, when you're tired and fatigued or ill, it can be more difficult to manage and regulate your emotions. What am I worried about happening? And I do this with children all the time. I'm worried I'm going to fail all my exams. Well, how many times have you actually failed all your exams? Remember, we've got a negative cognitive bias and we want to change that. Well, I've never failed an exam. Oh, right. So you've got a 100% success rate of passing an exam, or a 95% success rate. So how likely is it to actually happen? And let's put this into perspective. Even if you've got an 80% success rate with exams, if I was going to sell you a lottery ticket with an 80% success rate of winning, would you say, no, I'm not going to do it because I might not win? You wouldn't buy it. You would buy it because 80% is a good odds. So rationalize it. And then, as I say, get over the catastrophization. What will I do if it does come true? Okay, let's say you fail all your exams. What will you do? Can I retake them? Yeah, you can retake them. There you go. That's it. You'll be fine. You know, but I have to go to university at 18. No, you don't. You can go at 19. You can go at 20, 21, 22. Or you can go to college and do other exams. Or maybe you don't even need those exams. Or, you know, well, what if I don't get a grade 8? Well, you might get grade 7. Is that okay? Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that would be okay. And will you be okay? Because you are still valued. We still love you for who you are, not your exam results. Nobody goes up to somebody and says, hi, what grade did you get in your maths GCSE? I got a 6, a level 6. Oh, I'm afraid I can't talk to you because I'm looking for somebody with a level 8 or higher. That's not how we do it. You know, when we get married, when people die and we have a eulogy, we don't talk about how much money they've got. We don't talk about their exam results. We talk about relationships and what they meant to people. And as part of this, we've got to embrace failure. Failure is good. Failure is amazing. Let's fail more often. Let's not be afraid of it. No failure, any feedback. So what have you learned from that situation? What are you going to do instead? So on the slides here are some anxiety resources that I can recommend, okay, that you may wish to use. So if you're watching this as a recording, I've got a lot of time, but so pause on these on there. And also there's some resources as well for ASC and SCN as well with regard to that. And there's a lot of crossover. For parents, you can use the CBT examples I've shared, but there are also other resources for parents to use as well. So I'm just going to finish up at the very beginning of this, which might seem like ages ago. I talked about the autonomic nervous system and the sympathetic system. The opposite to this is the parasympathetic system, and it tells your body to relax and rest and digest, and it helps physical healing. And 75% of this is in your vagus nerve, which is in your neck, but it actually extends to all your organs and to all your fingertips and all your toes. And the more you stimulate your vagus nerve, the better your vagal tone, and it's producing phenomenal results. And it's shown to help improve sort of emotional regulation in neurodivergent children and adults as well. Now, you can have operations to put electrical stimulants in. I'm not recommending you do that. You can also buy, they're called, I've seen one called NeuroSim. They're about £600 on, you know, which they give an electrical stimulant. Don't buy those. I'm going to tell you all the ways now that research has shown that you can stimulate your vagus nerve. And you'll see the lot of these are already recommended for use with mental health. Okay. Acupuncture, this is why it works. These all stimulate your vagus nerve. Hydrotherapy, this is why cold swimming helps. Or I have an ice helmet in my freezer for migraines, and it stops an irritable bowel attack. It helps me feel calm. Look, cocoa powder's on there. This is why chocolate helps. Sugar's on there. Tea is on there. So that's why, you know, somebody says have a hot, sweet cup of tea when you're in shock. Emotional tears, when you cry for emotional reasons, you feel better afterwards because cortisol is in those tears, and this dissipates cortisol. TENS machines. So don't buy a £600 sim, buy a 20 quid TENS machine and a £5 ear adapter and clip it to the inner ear part there. And obviously Google this, and just give yourself a few shocks a day. They did a study, and then it's Google it because it's a little bit more sort of recommended than that. What's the word I'm looking for? Ways of doing it. But I read a study once that on diabetic patients, they did it for 15 minutes a day and it reduced their blood sugar levels by 75%. And, Great Ormond Street Hospital recommend TENS machines on the ear for pain relief in children. It is that powerful. So get your child to do it when they're feeling overwhelmed, to do one of these things, to do the tapping. If you Google tapping scripts for anxiety, they're really good. If they have a sort of a routine, we know that sometimes stimming for autistic children and adults can be reassuring. And that's going to be potentially linked sometimes to the vagus nerve because it is calming and grounding. That is a whistle-stop tour of anxiety. I've left some time to take questions, but while you do that, let me just tell you that if you want more of me, I've got a professional sort of image on LinkedIn and my company Balance Schools. Personal stuff, more light-hearted, but not light-hearted, but more, I don't know, real mental health advice. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok as well, and that's for adult mental health advice. And if you are in an education setting, I do produce CBT resources for schools, which can be used at unlimited times. There's a specialist SEN handbook as well for students with dyslexia, and that's all around self-regulation, self-esteem, managing your anxiety, safety thinking and intervention programs. And if you're an adult and you want some support with your mental health, I have a subscription service called Balance People, where I send you regular emails, and there's lots of CBT resources there for you when you have a bad day or you need help. So I know many of you are watching this on the recording. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me through my website or Samantha Garner if you want to do that, to ask me any questions. Otherwise, Sam, that's me. That's my whistle-stop tour and hopefully helpful sort of session on managing anxiety.
Oh, thank you so much, Sam. That was absolutely amazing. I'm just going to stop the recording now.
Okay.
Just so if anybody's got any questions, they work out with the recording. So I'll just stop that now.